Thanks, Tim. Thanks very much.
Now you're thinking for us.
Oh, thank you.
And now a moment of refreshment. Hey, this is really thoughtful.
This is the pause that refreshes.
I'm sorry.
Okay. The question is, from a female perspective, wait, come back up here. No, you can't. You're behind a pole from my perspective. Come on back up for a second. Just for a second. Okay, first tell us your name. Rena, okay. Elaborate on the question, from a female perspective, comma.
Boy, do the guys on this stage differentiate between the male and female body.
With our reputation, do we differentiate? How can you ask? Bless the difference. But you breathe air just like I do, and 10 fingers just like I have. Yeah, you've got a little bit different chemistry in the hormone section, but most of the other stuff isn't hugely different.
Okay, so this is not a grain question. This is a male-female question. Am I correct? Wait, hang on.
I'd like to address the question.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm going to ask that, hang on one second. We got about 5 more minutes of directed questions up here, and then we'll go to your question and other audience questions, okay? Because we got one more topic to cover before we go there. And we will go there.
Let me give a quick...
No, hang on. We got one more topic that's...
Okay, so let me give that quick last word.
Now, we'll come back to it. Trust me.
I'll give that quick last word real quick.
You got the grain thing?
Yeah.
Oh, excuse me, that's right. I misunderstood. Okay, last word on the grain topic. And I promise we will come back to that. It's in the list.
The International Olympic Committee sponsored a study that was funded by, of all people, the Mars Corporation, which is amazing. But so they came out with certain things that said that all sugars were the same. I wasn't surprised to find that information out. But what they said about bodybuilding, growing, strength, body development, recovery, growth and repair, in all of these areas, what they came up with was that the limiting factor on growth and repair, whether it's building muscle or healing, the limiting factor was always found to be insufficient protein. If there is insufficient protein, it is impossible to grow. Whether you're trying to grow another pound of muscle or whether you're trying to grow another inch on a child, growth is inhibited through insufficient protein. I have crunched the numbers. I know Brian's crunched the numbers. I'm sure David has even crunched the numbers many times over. The diet that we are recommending is higher in protein than almost any diet on the planet. Vegetables have more protein per calorie than most animal flesh foods. And when the challenge I have is keeping my protein low enough, not high enough. I consume more protein than probably anybody I know between the fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds that I consume. And I don't think that, and this is the grain thing, so this is where we see slightly different. I think that as long as I'm consuming sufficient proteins from my greens and from my nuts and seeds, that I'm having no problem growing or getting bigger if that's what I choose to do, or doing the repair from the breakdown of the training of the day before.
Okay, let's move on to another topic, and we do have a time limiting factor because Brian has to leave at 11:30 to catch that which is known as a plane. So we are going to only have about 17 or 18 more minutes here, and I know it would be great if it could go on all day, and perhaps at some future time we'll reconvene this panel and just pick up this conversation and go take it to the next level. The one remaining super topic is not superfood, but as Brian kind of jumped in a little earlier in the conversation, is fruit. And this is a place where perhaps there may be more difference of opinion than any of the other topics we've had, and I know it's one that a lot of you have questions about, and that's why I kind of saved it for last here. Fruit is clearly a source of calories, it's a source of simple sugars, energy, There's issues about that with respect to Candida. There's other issues about that. And what I'd like to do is just talk about it in small chunks. The first chunk is simply to ask the question, as a species, human beings, where do we get energy from? David, you want to take that first? Just really brief, because we're going to have several chunks here.
Okay, first source of energy is our spirit, our own desire and will to live. That's the number one source of energy. You can have no oxygen, have no food, and your spirit can keep you alive.
Okay, good. Doug, where do we get energy from?
I certainly agree with David, but I would say that the energy to have spirit comes from sleep.
Okay, from spirit, from sleep. Brian?
I'll be the politician. It comes from energy, it comes from sleep, it comes from food, and it comes from romance.
Romance. Okay, well, we're in the place for that. We're definitely in the right place then for this discussion. Okay, if we distinguish between energy and fuel, where fuel has to be converted into energy in order for work to get done, what function do fruits play, and would you subdivide fruits into some smaller categories in order to answer the question better? Doug, why don't you go first on this one?
Energy and fuel are obviously a different thing. Fuel being what's in your gas tank, and energy being what's in your battery. And when we consume food, we're consuming it for its fuel and the nutrients that are in it as well, obviously. Oh, doesn't that smell good? Rain.
He said rain with an R and not
rain
grain
that's
with
right.
a G.
Yeah, that's rain. That smells good. Now I've totally...
That was good.
Something about fruits.
Quick,
Yeah.
like Joseph Lieberman.
And so I think that fruits have always, since, according to the anthropologists, Richard Leakey and many other famous anthropologists, who have hypothesized that the reason that we experienced a brain growth that exceeded all of our ancestors and our cousins in the anthropoid primate world was because we found a fuel source that was denser than dark green leafy vegetables. Now, some of them say that fuel source was fruit. Some of them say that fuel source was fat in the form of fatty fruit. And some of them even say that fuel source, which I think is absolute hogwash, some of them say that that fuel source was fat in the form of marrow from bones. I just can't imagine some guy walking in the savannah of Africa chasing a herd of lions out of a feeding frenzy so that he can get to the bones marrow. But if you want to try chasing a herd of lions off their food, you can go for it. But I think both fruits and fatty fruits were the sources of denser calories that encouraged and fostered this brain development, because brain is exceptionally greedy tissue as far as usage of fuel. So the fruits that I tend not to use, I think, are the same ones that everyone else tends not to use. I'm not recommending the use of dried fruits in almost any capacity ever other than transition.
Okay, Brian, real briefly, because we're going to take it in several chunks.
Well, I absolutely concur with the brain development having a lot to do with the consumption of fruit, because there's no question in my mind, or probably any competent anthropologist, that we were frugivorous, fruit-eating creatures. But once again, to quote, we were also herbal-eating creatures, green-eating creatures for healing. And to bring you up to speed, in the year 2000, all of us must be in that healing mode far more than we were. We did eat meat. There's no question about that. And it was raw in its initial stage, etc. There were subcultures. Now we're starting to understand that there were two base tribes that came out of Africa and went in different directions. And one of the subcultures remained vegetarian. The other major subculture, at one point in history, went to meat. But the equilibrium balanced out by the mere fact that today 60% of the world's population is still vegetarian. So the vegetarians won out. So when the anthropologists tell us, most of them, that we're better off because we ate meat and our brains grew because we ate meat, well then why the heck today are 60% of us vegetarian and the rest of us should be vegetarian?
Really good. One question was handed up from the audience while you were answering, and we should take a minute to respond to it, and we'll just take any one response. David, why don't we give this to you? Let's just define fruit.
Yeah. Fruit is the seed-bearing member of a plant's reproductive cycle.
So, for example, on an avocado tree...
Cucumbers a fruit, avocados a fruit, tomatoes a fruit, bananas a fruit. Anything that can bear the seed of the plant for reproduction is therefore a fruit.
Okay. And Doug, you concur, when you talk about fruit, are you talking about eating the full range of fruits as a mainstay in your diet?
There are different definitions of fruit, and it depends on whose definition you want to use. And what most people get confused with is the difference between the botanist's definition of fruit and the nutritionist's definition of fruit and the kitchen definition of fruit. You know, to the nutritionist, a tomato is a vegetable, but to the botanist, it's a fruit. And in the kitchen, the pineapple is a fruit, but to the botanist, it's a vegetable. And there are many books out. One of them, I remember the title, I Live on Fruit. And these people said, well, obviously, of course, nuts and seeds are the fruit of the nut and seed trees. By David's definition, it doesn't fit as fruit. I don't tend to think of nuts and seeds as fruit. And I would much prefer to get my fats from fruits like jack or durian or olive or avocado long before I was going to choose concentrated nuts or seeds. But 20 years ago as a raw foodist, I was eating huge amounts of nuts and seeds. The transition that happened to juicier foods took some time. I think that what people get confused when we mix metaphors, when we talk about, for instance, and I'm not picking on David, he understood exactly what he was talking about, but he talked about consuming fats and vegetables and fruit, whereas nutritionally we would talk about consuming fats and proteins and carbohydrates. And I know he understood what he was saying, but a lot of people, they got confused because when we're talking about fats as one thing, and, well, aren't they fruits too? Yeah, he was, you know, and all of a sudden, well, if those are fruits, and this other corner of the triangle is fruits, it gets confusing. I think the whole thing of what is a fruit is not much of an issue to me.
Brian, do you want to add anything on what is a fruit, real briefly?
Well, I think that both had very valid points. The botanical explanation is very close to what David expressed to us. And our perception, we've skewed this. We've manipulated it. In our perception, a fruit is a cucumber, but because it's not sugar-oriented, we would eat that with vegetables. So I would agree that the botanical is what David said, though.
Good. Now let's go to the meat of the matter, as it were. When we want to think of having fruit in our diet, and let's set aside those who are seriously or terminally ill, and let's just focus on that 70 or whatever % of the population that's only moderately seriously ill, and the symptoms having not yet been
extreme,
diagnosed.
sub-extreme, and not so extreme.
We call it the general public. For the general public, the percentage or the use of fruit in the diet, I know that you use fruit very differently. Doug, I know you probably use a lot more fruit and probably specific kinds of fruit. David, you use some. Brian, you probably recommend less than the other two. What I'd like to do is have each of you talk about fruit in that way. And Brian, why don't you go ahead and go first on this one?
Well, I'm going to be redundant, I'm going to repeat what I said before. For healthy people, who is a healthy person? A person who does not have a virus, a bacteria, a mold, a fungus, a yeast, or a cancer. So in this audience right now, think, do I have one of those problems? 15% by weight of your entire diet, we suggest consuming fruit. That's ripened on the vine, the plant, or the bush. If one consumes fruit juice, a tad of fruit juice, 90% or more water with it. That's basically what we talk about with fruit. If you have the microbial problems, it's either no fruit or very, very rarely fruit.
Now, just to be clear, when you say 15% by weight, you mean taking the whole fruit, like the whole peach,
no.
or do you mean something else?
Of your entire diet. So let's imagine that you eat 10 pounds of food, of that 10 pounds of food, 1.5 pounds can be fruit.
Okay. But weighed with the seed in it, weighed as the whole fruit.
Absolutely.
Okay. David?
Definitely, if someone has mold, yeast, fungus, cancer, you have to be careful with fruit because fruit can just, diet condition can run away on fruit. If someone is very, I think what we really have to look at is how active someone is too. The more active they are and the healthier they are, the bigger their sugar gas tank, they can burn up more fuel and use more fruit. If someone is not active, if they sit behind a computer all day, eating dates is a disaster. Eating oranges is going to stimulate them to get up and do something, or it's going to start flushing their system out of minerals because the body's going to have all this sugar and it's going to be, okay, let's do something. And if they don't do anything, then what ends up happening, you get an insulin response. You can have calcium being called into the blood to buffer the sugar because sugar can be acidifying in the blood. I'd say the lots of fruits that are out there right now that are very sweet are kind of like high octane fuel. And if you run like an Indy 500 race in those vehicles that they have, you put gasoline in, it has to be used immediately or it will burn through the valve, it will burn through the piping. That's the same in the human body. If you put in that high intensity fuel, you've got to burn it up instantly. It varies per person. It depends on how active they are. It depends on where their health is. If they have fungus, yeast, mold, cancer, that's a whole different story. Myself, I'm definitely more of a fat-burning metabolism. I don't need much fruit. I've found for myself to be it to be quite liberating to be energized and have enough energy to go through my day with almost no fruit.
Okay, we got to speed up here because Brian's got to go. But Doug, let's give you a chance to respond on this, and I've got the next question for you also.
Well, ask the question one more time, please. Because I listened to both answers.
Of fruit in the diet?
You want to know the percentage of fruit in the diet?
Just, how you think about that for a typical person.
I honestly don't think of it in those terms. I would tend to think much more in terms of protein, fat, and carbohydrate.
Okay.
And if I was going to do it that way, because if 20% of my diet comes from the fats in durian, I'm still eating fruit. And so it gives...
You mean 20% of your calories?
If 20% of my calories come from the fats that are found in durian, if all I ate all day was durian, which is about an 18% fat fruit, so I'm eating 18% of my calories as fat, but I'm eating 100% fruit for the day, it's a funny answer, right? So I would much rather answer it as carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. And my answer tends to be pretty much aligned, again, with the International Olympic Committee recommendations, with the U.S. Olympic Committee recommendations, which are, they're recommending approximately 60% carbohydrates. I'm recommending for my highest top athletes, more like 70% carbohydrates.
And for a more average person who goes to work...
The numbers don't change that much, just less calories. As I said earlier, we just reduce the calories, but 70% of the diet coming from 70 to 75% of the diet coming from carbohydrates, approximately 10% coming from protein, and approximately 15 to 20% coming from fats.
And just to be clear, whereas Brian's 15% was by counterweight,
which I have no idea what that means in terms
your
of calories.
15% is percent of calories. Or your percentage, excuse me.
My
your
percentage
70%
is in terms of total calories.
Okay. So we're using different yardsticks.
Absolutely.
And that can be a source of some of the confusion.
Totally.
Okay, yeah.
Because if you buy an 8-pound durian and eat it and throw away the skin and throw away the pits, you're throwing away 7 pounds.
And just for the benefit of the audience, I want to really, really emphasize one of the distinctions going on here is the difference in the units of measure. And it's very important if you're going to look at David's view or Brian's view or Doug's view, where one is by weight, one is by calories, one is by dry weight, and so forth. They're different ways of measuring. And so if you're going to explore David's recommendations as a lifestyle, if you're going to explore Brian's, if you're going to explore Doug's, you need to get your mindset into the unit of measure, the system of measurement that they're actually using, in order even to explore what they're saying in the way that they intended it in the first place. Very important distinction for everybody, and I think often a distinction that's lost in conversation.
I would say this, and hopefully what this does is bring Brian and I even into closer alignment, is that
looks like alignment to us.
Right, if I was going to recommend that an athlete reduce their fruit content, then I would have to have them increase their grain content. Because they've got to have a calorie source, and vegetables are virtually a neutral calorie source. It takes almost as much to get the calories out as what you put in, as T.C. Fry used to talk about negative calories. But you've got to get calories from somewhere, and neither of us are recommending a high-fat diet. There are only very few people on the planet recommending a high-fat diet.
Okay.
That doesn't
Atkins
make David
is one.
wrong.
Have you seen
Yeah,
Atkins lately?
Stillman.
Dr. A, yeah. We won't say his name, Dr.
I
A.
definitely don't recommend a high-fat diet for therapeutic use. Maybe in some cases, that's maybe 1% of cases. I personally thrive on a high-fat diet. That's not going to work for most people. Some people need more of a balance, more fruit, more vegetables. I think it's good to err on the side of having more vegetables.
Okay. One last place to explore, which relates to sugar. We're going to call this topic the Candida topic. The Candida topic. Now, for the sake of the people in the room, let's start by what is Candida, not in a human physiology sense, but in more of a general biological sense. You know, what is it related to? What is it part of the family of? And how do its relatives function in the world? Doug, can you start? You want Brian to take that? Okay. Brian, what is Candida in a biological sense?
Candida is a fungi that's everywhere present in our environment on the planet. If you go to Arizona, you go to Death Valley, you're going to find Candida there in very small amounts. We are bathing in it here. In humid climates, it is massive. Why was it not a problem or presented as a problem 25 years ago? It's about immunological function, the strength of our immune system. Today we've created a whole new disease among several others called Candida, where this immune system of ours no longer can prevent this ever-present, omnipresent fungi that's everywhere in the atmosphere. So with our immune systems down, it comes into our bodies, and it multiplies the weaker our immune system becomes.
So in a biological sense, under what conditions do fungi, Candida being a fungus, under what conditions do fungi thrive in general?
They love dark, they love wet, and they love sugary.
And low
Warm,
oxygen, perhaps?
and I'll add warm, he's right.
Yeah.
Warm.
So where in the human body, let's get somebody else, David, where in the human body are these conditions most likely to occur?
You'll find them throughout the digestive tract. You'll find this happening. Sometimes people get this thing called thrush, Candida overgrowth in the mouth. It could be vaginal yeast infections. It can manifest itself in a lot of ways. Sometimes you can notice if someone has Candida, if you look at their toenails or fingernails, their body's immune system is so lowered that their body no longer can keep fungus away from accumulating under the nails. If someone's got that, that's an obvious Candida situation.
And let's just be really clear. It's not that the Candida is attacking us. It's that we've lowered our ability to process out the Candida that's already there, always there.
Candida will thrive when the conditions are right. It's not that smart to attack us.
Okay.
It's like mushrooms outside. They grow when it's rainy and they go away when it's not. And mosquitoes didn't make the pond stagnant. They just grow where the conditions are good.
And let's go back again and repeat the conditions under which Candida will thrive. It's dark,
Warm,
low
oxygen, which somebody reminded us
Right.
of out there, and high sugar contents.
and moist.
Moist.
And
wet.
moist. Okay. So what do we have to do with our, I'm going to say our metabolism, but I really mean to say more our whole physiology. What do we have to do with our physiology? Not to get rid of the Candida, because that's the wrong way of thinking about it. It's a physical impossibility to get rid of Candida in a total sense. But to bring the Candida level into a place where it's not adversely affecting our functioning. Anybody? Doug, you haven't really jumped in on this one yet.
Well, I think the maintenance of a stable, well, let's take it in a bigger picture. I think the maintenance of homeostasis, a condition where things remain the same, and a maintenance of a healthy homeostasis, a condition where things remain the same in a healthy way, is one of the key points in achieving any type of health, and certainly with this issue of candidiasis. Specifically, what we're looking for is to reduce the swings in blood sugar levels.
Okay, and how can we go about that? One of the common recommendations, yank all the sugar, yank all the carbohydrates.
Well,
is that going to restore the homeostatic balance that you're describing?
People in an ICU in a hospital achieve homeostasis by consuming an IV drip of saline and sugar solution, and rather than putting sugars in jolt content, a jolt now and then 12 hours later another jolt, like they do with most of the drugs that they give people in the mainstream. Instead, what they go is drip, drip, drip. You're going to get a little tiny bit of sugar, a little more, and maintain a steady state situation. This can be done on almost any foods.
Okay. Agreement, disagreement? Brian?
Well, certainly we would have to agree with what Doug said, but to answer the question in the way that I may, what one needs to do to eliminate something that's caused from darkness, lack of oxygen, moisture, all of these things that we spoke about, is to increase those elements into the body. And the number one way to do that is through sun-drenched, non-sugar-based foods. The most sun-drenched food, which carries O1, peroxide oxygens, into the body, are chlorophyll foods. So that's number one. And yes, I concur 100% with what you suggested, that one must eliminate all forms of sugar and cooked grains and things of this nature. Because if you do not do that, you're going to create a further cesspool for this fungi to grow and to develop.
Okay, so we have a little difference because, Doug, you're saying that the body can achieve the appropriate homeostasis on any food or combinations of food, including fruits in the mix. And, Brian, you're saying really no fruits because obviously they carry with them a lot of sugar.
I certainly have, I couldn't count the number of experiences, but I certainly have, in 20 years of experience now, countless stories of people coming to me with a candidiasis problem and achieving a complete resolution of this problem on a very high fruit diet. In fact, some of them on a total fruit diet. Yes, I've seen it done. I've seen it done many times. It's not so much, I don't believe, the consumption of the fruit as it is the swings in blood sugar that result from types of fruits that are chosen. No matter what you eat, you're going to have blood sugar, and even if you don't eat, you're going to have blood sugar or you die. A person who doesn't eat for 30 days is still going to have a blood sugar level that's going to be normally within the what is considered the normal range for people who are eating. And so if Candida thrives off of sugars, end of discussion, then there is no hope because everyone has blood sugar. What we want to do is not have those sugars spill over into the cavities that David was talking about.
Okay, David, last comment at this point.
I've studied this Candida situation with Dr. Gabriel Cousins. I've studied Brian's work on this subject. I've worked with probably hundreds of people with Candida. I know what works. I'm sure Brian knows what works. You have to fast from sugar for a while. When you come back on sugar, whether it's complex carbohydrates, which I definitely think need to be eliminated permanently from the diet if there is a Candida problem. But if you come back on sugar, it's got to be whole fruit, 1 to 3 pieces of low sugar type of fruit. For example, things like a peach or a plum or a pear, for example. Pears are excellent for this situation. So you get a little bit of sugar so your body can still function, your brain can still work. Then you go back on a sugar fast. You just fast from sugar. You can eat all these other types of foods, including the green juices, which works. I would recommend is taking in the fat source. The best fat source for Candida, without a doubt, is coconut and coconut oil. No question about that. That becomes a major calorie source. Mega dosing on probiotics and soil-based organisms has significant help in that situation. The very basis of our immune system is initially from the mother's milk. Then the baby's second food is dirt, which they eat off the ground. That's just we're biologically set up that way. We get soil organisms working with probiotics in our system from age 1 on. That becomes the basis of our immune system. Generally, people with Candida don't have that working. We need to restore that.
Okay, we could have much more discussion on this, but we need to get Brian to the airport, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to close down the panel officially for the camera, and then Doug and David, if you're willing, Doug, if you two are willing to stay up here a little longer, we'll continue with audience questions and some of the other things, but let's give Brian a chance to get home in one piece. Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to continue on. Let's continue the Candida discussion just a little bit further, and then we'll go into the male-female discussion that was brought up from the audience earlier. So, Doug, Brian and David have both suggested that eliminating sugars from the diet is essential to giving the body back its ability to flush out Candida. And you've suggested that actually you can do that quite fine with fruits, which do have sugar, and that really the issue is any combination of foods, if I understand correctly, that will bring the body to a healthy homeostasis. Let's just pursue this difference a little more and give you a chance to respond to what Brian and David have both just said.
All right. First, if we want an immediate resolution of the problem, what we want to do is have a drop in blood sugar. This can be achieved most expeditiously by eliminating food from the program completely. Go on water, air, and rest. Blood sugar levels will drop, but they will not drop dramatically. They might drop 20%, they might drop 30%. Sometimes they might drop a lot and then come back up, but if we're talking about a blood sugar level normal being 100, they're going to drop down to normally down to 80, 70, 60, and then come back up to 80 or 90 on their own, because no matter what you eat, your body converts it into sugar. And if you eat a diet of pure fat, the body converts it into sugar and you maintain blood sugar. And so, sure, if a person is in a situation where we need to take an intervention, well, you could begin by fasting or by eliminating all food, which will result, or you could go to a program of all greens, which is, as we said, basically not a calorie source, hence very little food. The minerals that are there, the alkalinization that is there, maybe in some way is related to candidiasis, but it's not the big issue. Sugar is the issue. And so, once again, by eating those greens, we're going to see a dramatic drop in blood sugar. These are effective techniques, but going to small amounts of fruit on a relatively frequent basis has also, as I said, I've seen hundreds of cases of people that have gotten well that way also. I haven't found Candida to be such a big issue, except for the people who go to the Candida therapists or the Candida doctors or the Candida helpers who put them on programs, and they come to me or they come to Dave and they say, I've had Candida for 2 or 3 years and I've dropped this out and I've dropped that out. It's a fungus, for goodness sakes. If it stops raining, the mushrooms stop growing within a day or two. If you're going to resolve this problem and it takes you more than 2 or 3 weeks, you're not resolving the problem. It's not something that should be an ongoing year in, year out thing. By cutting out fruit for years and then eating lots of yeast-free breads instead, you're just continuing the problem. Whether it's yeast-free breads or non-yeast-free breads, but somehow people think that if you have Candida, so therefore you shouldn't eat yeast, even though it's a completely different yeast than the Candida yeast is. It's unrelated. So for me, I think there are so many ways to solve this problem. I don't think that Brian's way is wrong. I don't think that David's way is wrong, and I certainly haven't seen that my way is wrong. They all work really well. It's why we're who we are, and everybody else is out there in medicine pushing therapies on people.
Okay. The other question that we can pursue is the question that came up from the audience earlier, which has to do with differences in diet for men and women. And there certainly are hormonal differences and some structural differences between men and women. Of course, we're all part of the same species as well. So, David, what would be your thoughts as to dietary differences, if any, for men and women in general, setting aside a pregnant woman or a menopausal woman, but just people kind of going through their teens, 20s, 30s, just motoring along through life?
That's a difficult question. It's very variable. I think mostly for women in transition to live foods, definitely taking in lots of green juices can be strongly beneficial because of the menstrual flow can be quite large. And women generally in this society experience quite a large menstrual flow. Once again, being on a total live food diet, having good rhythm of the menstrual cycle, having little to no flow is very natural, very healthy. If a woman does have no flow for a long period of time, is concerned about it, eating a little bit more nuts and seeds or even avocado can induce more flow, and that might help you with your regularity. And I know women who do bring in occasionally more nuts and seeds to just to be more in sync with their rhythm and see how the menstrual cycle flows from that.
And Doug, what about from your point of view?
We're talking about overlapping bell curves here between man's physiology and woman's physiology. Having worked with Martina Navratilova, I think you know what I mean. She certainly was a woman. When I did deep tissue work on her, there's no question, I'm working with a woman, but she had a man's physique in many ways. Broad shoulders, exceptionally low body fat. In general, I think the biggest difference isn't the hormonal thing. The hormonal thing works because of the body fat thing. I don't know which came first, the chicken or the egg, but I never saw an egg lay a chicken. So what we're looking at is really that a female in general, a healthy female in general, carries a higher body fat by about 5 or 6 points than a healthy male. And that fat needs to be reflected in some way in their fat consumption, which is their dense caloric consumption. That's where they're getting their it's double the caloric consumption of proteins or carbohydrates per weight. And so generally I find that women tend to consume a little more fat than men, but we're talking a couple of percentage points, not huge, and that it works for them to do so. Those fats are important in their hormone production, but on the same end, at the other end, they equally have problems. If they give in to that desire and start to go to extremely high-fat diets, they also run into severe hormone-generated problems, and many of the cancers and many of the other things that women will have specific problems with reproductive organs and secondary sexual characteristic organs these problems can be fostered by excessive fat consumption.
Okay.
As long as we're talking about the issue of women, the differences between men and women, could you go into the question of foods to include if you are a menopausal woman, and foods to avoid, and what specific things you can do to reduce things like hot flashes and all the other discomforts that go along with menopause? My name is Titi Weissel. Thank you.
Excellent question. Lots of vegetables of all different kinds, non-sweet roots like burdock root or radish. Those types of foods contain a lot of precursors to hormones. Coconut oil is an excellent, sometimes it's called coconut butter. Coconut oil is excellent in that it has a compound in it which is the precursor to all the hormones, including DHEA, including testosterone, including estrogen and progesterone, the whole thing. Coconut oil is probably overall, if you're having problems selecting a fat which is going to work for you, and if you feel like if you have too many nuts and seeds that will throw you off, or even avocado will throw you off, that coconut butter or coconut oil can be extremely balancing. And I've seen that in some cases. Women who are hormonally all over the place come right into balance when they bring coconut oil in as the dominant fat source. That's one suggestion. Lots of green juices, I know for a fact, have worked with lots of women I know who are in that state right there, premenopausal or just going through menopause. And it seems, I've had somebody tell me that it literally is like the antidote, like going from being all over the place to just straight balance instantly. Will that work for everyone? I don't know, but it seems to work for a lot of women who I've consulted with.
The only thing I'd add to that is to not overeat. I think overeating is the biggest problem that we can look at. And by overeating, I'm not talking about volume, I'm talking about calories. So that whether it's overeating on any foods, it does not serve anyone to be overweight, but with every year it serves us less and less to carry around extra body fat. As we get older, we tend, in general, although it's not a factor of age, but we tend in general to carry less muscle mass, and hence we want to carry less fat as well so that we can feel the energy. We don't want to be spending all our energy carrying our bodies around. So be really watching to become trim becomes more important than I think anything else. I wouldn't say that specifically, oh, don't eat this food or don't eat that thing. I think that whole, fresh, ripe, raw, organic plants serve everyone's diet, and the things to eat are the things you really love.
Part of the question was not only what foods to emphasize, but also any particular foods to avoid in menopause.
Yeah. Please, come up.
Oh, I see. We can't understand. That's okay. Come on up.
Okay.
Come on up.
Okay, I'd like to introduce Karin Calabrese from Chicago. And will you please tell us your name?
Robin Sharon from the Annapurna Inn in Port Townsend, Washington.
Hey, Robin from Washington. Why don't you take my chair?
Thank you so much. With all due respect to the wonderful men up here, with all due respect, when we talk about menopause and we talk about women's issues, I want to hear it from a woman who looks like this woman over here. And I will tell you that the fats I eat are the fats I wear. And I also have a habit of eating late at night so I can work. Work is my quirk, but I recognize that I can't eat late at night and then crash. So if that's your problem of having a little extra on you, that is a problem, okay? And I really love the idea that you need more rest. And this is what I'm working on. But as a woman of my age, I have...
It's not a platform for a long speech.
Oh, no, just 2 minutes.
No.
1 minute, 30 seconds. 30 seconds. I've never had a hot flash. And when people talk about live foods, I'd like to give the floor to this beautiful woman.
Okay. Why don't you go ahead on down?
Thank you very much. It's a rather simplistic answer that I have. I am a postmenopausal woman. I am 53 years old, and as far as I know, I've gone through menopause with absolutely no symptoms whatsoever. No hot, okay, thank you. No hot flashes, no skin changes, no changes in my libido. Nothing has changed on me. One of the things that I found, because I work with people nutritionally also in Chicago, I have Karen's Inner Beauty Center in Chicago, and two things I found to be extremely important with making it through menopause with minimal symptoms. One is cleansing and detoxing the body, minimum 4 times a year, to reach the balance that they're talking about. And even though I eat about as close to perfect as I feel you can, I still cleanse and detox my body 4 times a year. And the main factor with women with the hot flashes is getting your blood sugar levels in balance. So much of the hot flashes have to do with excessive sugar, or foods converting to sugar in your system. And I use a very simple herb with my female clients to help them get that blood sugar balance when you don't have the willpower and the discipline and the motivation to do all the wonderful things that will help you get there. Fenugreek seed. It's that simple. F-E-N-U-G-R-E-E-K. Fenugreek seed. It's in a lot of Indian foods, which unfortunately aren't raw, but you can make tea out of it. If you're not so inclined, you can make take fenugreek and sprout it and add it to your juices. But by doing fenugreek seed on a regular basis, my female clients get over all of their hot flash symptoms. Real simple. And
Karin,
I believe in keeping it practical to keep it in practice.
Just to be sure, when you said cleanse 4 times a year, you mean cleanse in what way?
Well, when I say cleanse, of course, fasting comes into it, but I don't believe that you can just stop eating. And one of the things that I do when I work with clients is I work them toward a fast. And we do juices. We do live juices, mainly green juices. I do a lot of the superfoods. I think those help keep my system in balance. I don't sleep a lot. I only sleep like 4 hours a night. Right. Okay. I sleep 3.5, 4 hours a night. I run 5 businesses, and I'm absolutely never tired. I take advanced ballet classes. I work out 2 to 3 hours every day. But I think cleansing and detoxing the body, working up toward a fast, not just to stop eating. But the fenugreek seed is the answer, lady. You want to get over the hot flashes, do the fenugreek
Okay, now
seed.
let's just go back to the fenugreek for 1 second. I want to say back to you part of what you said and make sure that you meant what you said. What I heard you say was, for the people who aren't willing to do what it takes to eat what really is the proper diet, fenugreek will push down the symptoms. That's what I heard.
Well, it will bring the blood sugar level in balance, and I believe so many of the symptoms are because the blood sugar is out of balance. The hot flashes are directly related, in my opinion, to sugar consumption, and that's healthy sugars too.
So then, if a person ate a diet that kept their metabolism in balance and kept their blood sugar in balance over the long term, the hot flashes in all likelihood would simply never occur in the first place. You wouldn't need the fenugreek or anything else.
Absolutely, but how many people have no stress in their life or anything? I mean, eating properly is a great thing, but stresses create imbalances also.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we were being
You're
really,
right.
really
We're on
clear
the
in what
same
we were
page.
communicating. Karen, thanks so much for joining
Thank
us
you.
up here. Everybody, Karin Calabrese. And we're going to wrap up. We're going to wrap up the panel now. Dr. Doug Graham and David Wolfe and Larry Levine, the moderator. Thanks so much for coming and for staying so long.
A lifetime athlete and a raw fooder since 1978, Dr. Graham is an advisor to world-class athletes and trainers from around the globe. He has worked professionally with top performers from almost every sport and every field of entertainment, including such notables as tennis legend Martina Navratilova, NBA pro basketball player Ronnie Grandison, track Olympic sprinter Isa Phillips, pro women's soccer player Callie Withers, championship bodybuilder Kenneth G. Williams, Chicken Soup for the Soul co-author Mark Victor Hansen, and actress Demi Moore, along with others. He's given lectures around the globe to tens of thousands of people, and his books have been read by hundreds of thousands.
Doug Graham, he's somebody he's going to go down in the history books. This man really is somebody special.